epidemiology and its principles and its implement and its uses. Okay, we had defined epidemiology. We had said that what are the tools of epidemiology. We had also described the indices once more: mortality, morbidity, disability, and so many others. And then we moved on to the types of epidemiological studies, which are basically observational and experimental. Experimental, not very important from the exam point of view for MBBS, other than RCT, which has come once. So you may go through the randomized control trials once for the exam and draw that lovely algorithm and then explain the steps. But the observational epidemiology, including descriptive and the analytical studies, analytical consisting of case control and cohort, are all very important. These three, especially case control and cohort, can come as exam questions. Descriptive, slightly easy, but bits and pieces from there, like epidemic curve, what's an epidemic, and all that may come. Then we moved on from there, from the types of studies. We finished with randomized control, and we finished the last class with non-randomized studies, which is not very important from the exam point of view, but just from your completion of the lesson, we can just write it or keep it in our mind somewhere. Well, we come down to something which is maybe very easy to spell out or think about it in English, but slightly different: association and causation. I may be associated with you, but I am not the cause of the problem. Okay, so this is the slight difference in meaning in between association and causation. And association does come as an exam question sometimes. Now your slides also don't move. Okay. The association and causation are sometimes used interchangeably, okay, with the word relationship. But then concurrence of two variables more often than would be expected by chance. You are going on the road, you find a chap every day at the same point. First day you think it's by chance. Second day also you think it's by chance. But third day also you see him, and over a few months also you see him. So that is what is association in a simple way. Concurrence of two variables more often than would be expected by chance. You're going and he's standing there. Okay? So it does not necessarily imply cause. It can be cause, but it is not cause necessarily. Okay? Now, associated with association is a word called as correlation. Correlation indicates degree of association. Now, I told you about the aims of analytical epidemiology. One is to find whether there is an association, and the second is to find what is the strength, what is the degree of that association. I am a good friend of yours, but am I your best friend? Am I your best friend forever, as you call it nowadays? So these are implying the degree of association. Okay, correlation indicates degree of association between two characteristics, and it varies from -1 to 1. Now, -1 is negative correlation, 0 is no correlation, and 1 is strongest correlation. It can't be assumed again to be a cause, and it doesn't measure the risk. Just remember, when you study about association, you should also know something about correlation. Now, there are three types of association. One is spurious. Okay, like there is a perinatal mortality study in UK which was carried out in hospitals and in rural areas, as given in your book. Now they found that the mortality in the hospital was far, far more than that was recorded in the rural areas, which cannot be made, we cannot conclude from this study that there are more deaths of children in hospital. No, actually hospitalization is more important. So it's a spurious relationship. It is not true. Okay, there is a selection bias. You should compare two rural communities or two hospitals, like we talked about confounding, bias, and matching. Very, very important words in case control and cohort studies. And you must remember these words and also note down 2-3 lines of your own underneath them, because one of them is surely going to come in the exam. Now, the second type of association is indirect. Many Many associations first thought of as a cause later on turn out to be an indirect association. I'll give you an example. In the initial days, people thought people living in the sub-Himalayan region, that is below the hills, they had more of goiter because of lack of iodine in that soil or whatever was the reason, which turned out to be an indirect association, because goiter is present all over the country. There is no relationship with altitude. Okay, I'll make this clear. A common factor or confounding variable is present both in the disease and the characteristic being studied. Therefore, the example is iodine deficiency in altitudes and in endemic goiter. Now, this is an indirect association. Iodine deficiency exists in altitude because perhaps in the soil where they cultivate their food, there is less of iodine. And iodine deficiency also causes endemic goiter. Now, there is an apparent association between altitude and goiter, but actually it is not. It is because of a common factor, which is iodine deficiency. You cannot just say, because I stay in altitude, Hyderabad is almost at sea level. Because I stay in Uttarakhand, which is sub-Himalayan, I will get goiter, or somebody will get goiter. There is apparently an association, but actually there is none. So this is an indirect association because the cause is basically iodine deficiency. So if there is a direct association, indirect, there has to be a direct association. Now what is direct? It is causal. It is the cause. And it can be one-to-one and multifactorial. Without reading the slide, by this time, since you know the types of the theories of disease causation, you will know what is one-to-one. One germ causes one disease. Remember the classes which we took in June or perhaps May, germ theory of Louis Pasteur. So when change in one variable is followed by change in another, I have some factor in my body and I get the disease or I get the health condition. When a factor is present in the disease, is present, the disease must occur. So one-to-one, one-to-one examples are germ theory and Koch's postulates of tuberculosis. So please remember, there is something called as one-to-one. There are other examples given in the book and there are so many examples in your head, I know that. But more likely is what we call as multifactorial, which is more important in today's parlance, that is non-communicable diseases. Lung cancer, diabetes, hypertension, so many other things are caused because of a multiple number of factors, which reminds you of two theories of disease, which is multifactorial causation and web of causation. Okay, so there are many factors. Remember the second chapter on health. So you had many factors coming in to produce a disease. I cannot just say, since I take more salt, I will get hypertension. I also have to have an unhealthy lifestyle. I will also have habits like smoking and alcohol and various other factors like stress, genetic factors and other things, age. Okay, so there are multiple factors. Therefore, association is something which we defined as concurrence of two variables more often than would be expected by chance. Just remember, I am seeing this person on the road every day. It is not by chance. There has to be some kind of a association. Probably he is standing there because he knows that you are going this way every day and he wants to meet you or he wants to observe you. Okay? So therefore, concurrence of two variables more often than would be expected by chance. And there are three types: spurious, indirect, and direct. Direct can be of two types: one-to-one and multifactorial. That completes association, which is a part of the long question, or it can be a short note by itself. So this is multifactorial causation. Three factors may cause a disease, or all the three factors may have a synergistic effect and cause a disease. These are diagrams taken from your book. Therefore, we have two models of multifactorial causation. One is that there are many factors which independently attack you and you get a disease. The other one is that all these factors need to be together. They need to be having a synergistic effect to produce a disease. The additional criteria for judging causality, that is cause, are various. Like there is an example of smoking and lung cancer in the book, and they have described 6 factors called as temporal association, strength of association, specificity of the association, consistency, biological plausibility, and coherence of the association. A little difficult to actually fathom at this point in time when you have barely understood what is association. But at the same time, just remember, in case some examiner asks you, what are the additional criteria for judging, that this is the cause of a disease? How do you describe that I can find out the cause of a disease? You are saying association is not the cause, not necessarily the cause. So therefore, there are 6 factors which put together may make you infer that the temporal association, the strength of that association, the specificity and consistency, and biological plausibility and coherence may make you think that this is the cause of the disease. So what is temporal? The cause must precede the disease. I must be smoking for a long time to get lung cancer. I can't be getting lung cancer and then smoking. So there must be a cause which must precede the disease. We all have discussed strength of association in various formats. Even today I mentioned mainly being the relative risk. Okay, RR, relative risk. Just remember the lesson on cohort studies. RR and AR, attributable risk. Specificity, we will describe it more in the next chapter on screening. It is one-to-one relation between cause and effect. Okay, consistency, we all know. That chap is consistent in the class. He doesn't stand first, but he's been among the top 5 every year in every MBBS. So therefore, he is a consistent performer. Okay, the results can be replicated when studied in different settings and by different methods. So that is what is consistency. Tendulkar is a consistent batsman. He will score 50 in one match and 100 in the other, but he will never score a 0. So he is consistent. He is a dependable chap. Biological plausibility means association agrees with current understanding of the response of cells, tissues, that is basically your body. Okay, the association that you are studying agrees with the current understanding of the response of your body. Coherence is that with known facts that are thought to be relevant. We have some inkling, we have some studies in mind, and therefore this association that you are studying also is coherent with that fact. Epidemiology depends heavily on inferences drawn from observations rather than experimentation. Please remember this. Epidemiology is basically what you observe. This is a very, very important statement for you to understand the fundamentals. We observe, we take data, we go to the community, and therefore with those observations over a period of time, with studies having been done here and there and there and there, we finally come down to some common factor, and then we say, well, what everybody is speaking with similar studies is right, and therefore we have something called as a cause. So we are all studying medicine, surgery, and we read definition and cause of a disease. Those causes have been drawn from observations over decades by various workers doing research all over the world to make you say that anemia has got 10 causes. Okay? Mitral regurgitation occurs because of this cause, or because of these factors. All this is because of epidemiology, which has observed cases, communities, people over a period of time, rather than experimentation, where also we find the cause, but it is in a slightly lesser intensity as compared to observation. Well, this is also a short note, uses of epidemiology, and should have been in the end, because we always think about uses at the end of a chapter, but it is right in the middle. Now, what are the uses of epidemiology? Well, they have been studied by J.N. Morris, who identified 7 uses of epidemiology. Ladies and gentlemen, you got to reproduce these 7 in the exam in case it comes as a question, short note, or a part of the question. To study historically the rise and fall of disease in the population. Community diagnosis, easy. Planning and evaluation by the health workers in Delhi and in WHO. They depend on you on your studies to do some planning and evaluation. Evaluation of individuals' risks and chances, that is almost similar to the risk factors, which could be individualistic. Syndrome identification. We all know what's a syndrome. There are two or three or maybe more, symptoms or factors which cause a syndrome. All these are identified because of epidemiology. Sorry. Completing the natural history of disease. You have started studying a disease, you have come in the midway. You don't know what happens in the end, when the person dies, when he recovers. So this kind of epidemiological studies, they help you complete the natural history of disease. And lastly, we search for causes and risk factors. I've just spoken about association and how to judge causality. So therefore, these are the 7 uses of epidemiology. Before going into the details, before going into the paragraphs which are given after this in your book, I picked up 1 or 2 important lines from them. Please remember, you have to mug up these 7 and reproduce them in the exam. As an examiner, when I correct your paper, I will just see the 7 points and then only move on to the details. In case you have written something which is similar, it's okay. But sometimes people cook up their own things and write, which is not correct. So please remember, you have to write these 7 things, starting from rise and fall of disease, community diagnosis, planning and evaluation, evaluation of individuals' risks and chances, syndrome identification, completing the natural history of disease, and searching for causes. Okay, so these are the 7 uses of epidemiology. So study historically the rise and fall. We just talked about case control studies, where we go into the past history. We study various diseases which have occurred in the past: tuberculosis, plague, leprosy, filariasis. If you come to think of it, they are all rare nowadays, especially the last 2 which I mentioned. But still you know about them because you have studied the past cases. You have gone back retrospective and studied them. Smallpox is an example. When you were born, smallpox was already eradicated. Therefore, we studied the past histories of people and then knew about smallpox. Community diagnosis generally refers to identification and quantification of health problems in a community in terms of mortality and morbidity rates and ratios. Therefore, I talked about the indicators in the previous class and in the chapter on health. We got to make a community diagnosis by studying various factors and then calculating the indices. Okay? Some people are arriving now. It is 10:20. We are halfway through the class. It lays down the priorities in disease control and prevention, can serve as benchmarks for evaluation, which is the next point, and can be a source of new knowledge. Okay? So therefore, community diagnosis is the second use of epidemiology. We diagnose diseases for a community. We don't diagnose disease for an individual only. These are examples given in your book. Okay, it helps identify the submerged portion of the icebergs. She is doing a test on that child. So perhaps she is screening the people, the children, and she is trying to identify cases which are not yet diagnosed or which have not surfaced. Iceberg phenomenon of disease, important short note, will be coming in your exam. Health services planning and evaluation. We all know it is so important to plan the national health programs and other things. Today we have Pradhan Mantri so-and-so Yojana or Janani Suraksha Yojana or so-and-so Yojana or ICDS and all these things because there are health planners sitting at the right places who have got this epidemiological data with them and then studied them, analyzed them, drawn conclusions and formulated policies, planned. They have got plans for Indian children, plans for the pregnant woman, plans for the adolescent. So all these are because epidemiology has helped them come to that conclusion. And of course, we do some research. We also evaluate. Once you implement a program, you evaluate. Once you have been taught in the class, like I'm teaching today or tomorrow somebody will take a class or on Saturday, you will be evaluated when you come back. You will be given an exam. So how good were we? How could you understand? How much could you understand? So therefore we evaluate. Exam, basically. Evaluation of individuals' risks and chances. I will not spend more time here. We have described this word, we repeated it so many times. Relative risk and attributable risk in cohort studies. Okay, we evaluate a person's risk. I gave you the example of smokers in relative risk, and we found 10 by 1 is equal to 10. If you go back to your notes or the book, you will find smokers are 10 times greater at risk of developing cancer than non-smokers. Whereas the next example, attributable risk, incidence in exposed minus incidence is non-exposed divided by incidence in exposed. We found 90% was the answer. What it implies is 90% of lung cancer among smokers is because of the habit. Okay, 90% of lung cancers among smokers is because of the habit. And then we also had a population attributable risk where we would have, had we had an example and had the answer been 90, we would have said 90% of lung cancer in the population is due to the habit. Okay, so population attributable risk, relative risk, and of course odds ratio of case control studies. Very, very important for you to know, to calculate, to know the formulas. Odds ratio, I'll repeat, is a cross product ratio. Relative risk is incidence in exposed divided by incidence in non-exposed. Attributable risk, I just told you. So therefore, epidemiology helps you in identifying the risks and chances. Okay, then syndrome identification. We observe frequently the patients and we find out what are the peculiar findings in them. And therefore, we have come to the conclusion that there are various syndromes in people. I'll give you one example. Peptic ulcer can be two types, gastric and duodenal. They found association of poverty with gastric ulcer, but the same was not found in duodenal ulcer. So therefore, we have a syndrome where we call it as gastric ulcer syndrome, where we have poverty, this, that, rich food, or whatever you know, and we form a syndrome. Observing frequently associated findings in individual patients. Epidemiology is concerned with entire spectrum of disease, starting from the cause to the end. Either it is death or recovery. And therefore, we are in a better position to fill up the gaps in natural history much better than a clinician. Okay? That gives us the next use, which is completing natural history of disease. Okay? So we can fill up the gaps because we study the entire spectrum of disease. And lastly, we search for causes and the various other factors. So therefore, in good health, we have got environmental factors and genetic factors which are helping you maintain good health, or in case you have some trouble here and trouble here, then you go to ill health. By relating disease to interpopulation differences and other attributes. Now, what we study, we extrapolate it to the whole population and we find out the causes and risk factors, which gives a renewed impetus to research. I'm going slightly fast because you need not understand these things very deeply. You have to know the 7 things that we repeated. The uses of epidemiology may come as a part of a question or it can come as a short note. Define epidemiology. Describe case control studies in short. What are the uses of epidemiology? 2 marks, 5 marks, and 3 marks. Okay? This is the kind of long question you can get. Or you can get a short note, uses of epidemiology. In that case, jot down the 7 points and just write a couple of lines against each. Don't waste much time. Short note is short note. It should be finished within 3/4 of a page or max 1 page. Long question is long. Once you get this as a part of long question with 3 marks or 4 marks, you can write 1 page because the whole long question will be of 3 pages. So therefore, please remember, you have to know these 7 things. These are all from your books. Various examples are given. I have made them as slides because I didn't want to, again make them if I have to take a lecture for some other people like PGs or some other people. So therefore, please don't go into much of details. Know the bold black things first. I have made you understand in the class. Just write a line of what you understand. Because the moment you start reading the whole paragraphs and all those examples, given in the chapter in epidemiology, you will get lost. It is actually confusing at your level. We come to a very, very important part of the chapter called as infectious disease epidemiology. Very important, because like in COVID, we are throwing up a new terminology every day. Epidemiology has got a lot of terminologies. Remember, what we are going to discuss in the next 5 or 10 minutes is sure shot exam question or viva question going to be asked. You are going to be asked, what's an infection? We use this word every day. If I ask you right now, you will come up with multiple definitions. The entry and multiplication of an infectious agent in the body of man or animals that elicits a response, either in the form of an immune response or a disease, is infection. The entry and multiplication, please remember that, entry and multiplication, and producing either a response or a disease. When you have an immune response, you don't succumb to the disease. When you have less immunity, or perhaps your immune response is compromised, you get the disease. Definition of infection. Now, what are the levels of infection? Colonization. You have known these words since your second MBBS, microbiology or pathology days. And I'm sure the good student will be able to describe it. But in epidemiology, we give you definitions which you must know for life. Colonization denotes presence of an organism in specific part of the body with or without causing the disease. Our colon is colonized by various bacteria. Our alimentary system is colonized by various harmful and useful bacteria. Presence of an organism in a specific part of the body with or without causing a disease. Do we have a disease because of the bacteria in the colon? No. But the moment we have an immune response which is compromised, we may get the disease. Subclinical infection refers to an inapparent or asymptomatic infection or an infection that has a mild course which does not alert the patient enough to consult a physician. Subclinical, we are talking about asymptomatic, pre-symptomatic COVID right now. Okay, many of us have a little bit of malaise and a little bit of nose block for a day, and tomorrow we are okay. That is perhaps a subclinical or inapparent infection. Latent infection. A latent infection is inactive, though continuing to infect, and which remains capable of producing symptoms. I may not know, but I may be having a latent infection in me today. I am asymptomatic, but I can continue to infect you through touching or droplet or through, fecal-oral route or whatever. Okay? So therefore, the virus of herpes simplex is dormant in my body, is latent in my body, because in my childhood, I got chickenpox. So I have the virus of chickenpox or herpes simplex in my body. Tomorrow, if my immunity is compromised, that latent infection may become a full-fledged infection. Please remember the difference between latent and subclinical. Subclinical is inapparent, asymptomatic infection which runs a mild course. Okay? Whereas latent is capable of producing symptoms. So latent may become subclinical and then may become a full-fledged clinical infection. Clinical or symptomatic infection, I did not stress on this, all of you know, is an infection caused by microorganism which results in some sort of expression of lack of health, that is disease. And malaria, typhoid spelling is wrong. There are many examples like this. So therefore, we have described infection and we have said there are various types called colonization, subclinical, latent, and clinical. Now, what is contamination? See, it's very interesting. We use these words every day. The surface is contaminated. But do we stop to think what we are talking about? The presence of an infectious agent on the surface of the body or in clothes, bedding, toys, surgical instruments, or other inanimate things or substances including water, milk, and food. The water is contaminated, therefore we chlorinate it. Milk is contaminated, don't drink it. The food is contaminated because it's on the roadside. Okay, don't have it. So, presence of infectious agent on surface. Contamination on a body surface does not mean it is a carrier state. Please remember, contamination, pollution. Every day we use it. Presence of offensive but not necessarily infectious matter in the environment. Air, water, soil, noise. Okay, there are so many things which are which are used with the word pollution. Infestation. We have used these words again so many times. For persons or individuals or animals, the lodgement, development, and reproduction of arthropods on surface of body or in clothing. Scabies is an example. Lodgement, development, reproduction. Three things of arthropods on the surface. 5 key words. Okay, they don't go inside. Infestation is outside. Itch mite. I talked about scabies, which happens between your finger webs. The term may also be applied to describe invasion of the gut by parasitic worms. So other than the gut, we cannot say it invades the other parts of the body. So we can say parasitic worms are infesting the alimentary canal, like ascariasis, which we covered in the chapter on communicable diseases. So infestation is lodgement, development, reproduction of arthropods on the surface of the body or on your clothing. Host. We all are hosts. A person or animal, including birds and arthropods, that afford subsistence or lodgement to an infectious agent under natural conditions. Man is the host for all the diseases that we have discussed in the chapter on communicable diseases. We are the host of so many things. So therefore, we allow the lodgement and subsistence of an infectious agent in us. That is called as host. Now, there are various types of hosts. Obligate host. The organism can survive in a specific host only. Example, in measles, man is the specific host, obligate host. Okay, in typhoid fever, man is the obligate host. The organism can survive in a specific host only. Definitive host. If you have some memory of the chapter on life cycle of malaria, you will remember this word. The host in which parasite passes its sexual cycle is primary or definitive host. In this case, the mosquito. The female Anopheles mosquito in malaria is the definitive host. If you have remembered definitive host, you will remember man is the intermediate host in malaria. The host in which the parasite is present in larval or asexual state. When it is present in sexual cycle, it is definitive host. When it is present in asexual state, it is intermediate host. The example I just gave you was man in malaria. We also have transport host, the carrier in which the organism remains alive but does not undergo development. I will transport something on my body and carry it to you. So I am a transport host. The organism is on my body, it is alive, but it is not undergoing any development. So that brings us to the definition of disease, which I told you has not been defined. So what the book says, any deviation from normal functioning or from state of complete physical, social, or mental well-being. So anything which is a deviant from this is a disease. And this I have told you before also. What are the types of diseases? Infectious, a clinically manifest disease of man or animals due to infection. We have just described what is infection. Microorganisms are required. Contagious disease, a disease that is transmitted through contact. Very interesting. We have used these words in every day in our day-to-day lives. So contagious. If I touch you, I can transmit through contact. Communicable disease, an illness due to specific infectious agent or its toxic products capable of being directly or indirectly transmitted from man to man, animal to animal, or from environment to man or animal. So from anyone to anyone, but basically communicable. Epidemic. I described this in the chapter in the last class or last to last class on descriptive epidemiology. Unusual occurrence in a community or region of a disease, specific health-related events, clearly in excess of expected occurrence. This is the key line. Unusual occurrence is okay. In community, fine. All things happen in a community only. Disease, obviously we are talking about a disease. clearly in excess of expected occurrence is what we are not expecting, and therefore we term it as an epidemic. Expected frequency is got by keeping data of previous years with us. There are various types of epidemic. The slow epidemics we have described in the chapter on descriptive epidemiology are non-communicable diseases wherein time scale of epidemics is shifted from days or weeks to years. Okay, so we have slow epidemics. Outbreak. This term is used to denote a localized epidemic. Please remember, there is an outbreak of COVID in some part of Hyderabad, but there is an epidemic also in the country, or a pandemic. Okay, so this term outbreak is used for a localized epidemic. Get these terms inside you, in you. They are important. You will be using them in all subjects of MBBS, and you have been using them without perhaps knowing the exact meaning. Endemic refers to constant presence of a disease or an infectious agent within a geographical area or population without importation from outside. So now you know what is endemic. We are having malaria in India, and it doesn't come from our neighboring countries or something. It exists in our country constantly, from north to south, from east to west. Okay? So constant presence of a disease in a geographical area or country or population group without coming from outside is what is endemic. An endemic disease may burst into epidemics when conditions favor. There is malaria existing everywhere. Dengue happens every year. But suddenly one year, we will get some extra cases in Hyderabad and we say there is an epidemic. Please understand this. Endemic is something which is constantly present. Epidemic are bits and spurts from there. Outbreaks are smaller bits and spurts. Okay? Hyperendemic. The disease is constantly present at a high incidence or prevalence. Holoendemic. A high level of infection beginning early in life and affecting most of the child population, leading to a state of equilibrium. And that's what we don't suffer from influenza nowadays, because perhaps it is holoendemic. It has affected us as children. When we were small, we had runny noses and sore throats and fever, and our parents took us to doctors and we took flu shots and injections, and therefore it became holoendemic. We had it in our childhood, and therefore once we are adult, there is a state of equilibrium. Now if I get a common cold, within 2 days or 3 days, sometimes even without medicine, I become okay. So holoendemic, hyperendemic, please remember these words. Then there are certain diseases which are sporadic. They are scattered, sporadic. I am throwing things here and there. I am throwing a ball in the corner of the room. I am throwing one ball here. I am throwing one ball there. So therefore, the cases occur irregularly, haphazardly, from time to time, and generally infrequently. So please remember, there are diseases. Polio is, they say, eliminated from India. Tetanus is no more seen, and therefore it is sporadic. You may hear in the newspaper, one case of tetanus happened in some corner in Rajasthan. So therefore it is a sporadic disease which may occur irregularly, haphazardly, and generally infrequently. Pandemic. This is something which you are hearing from, let's say, March onwards. An epidemic usually affecting a large proportion of population, occurring over a wide geographical area. So outbreak, endemic, epidemic, endemic, and then pandemic. Okay? Epidemic, which usually affects a huge population over a large geographical area, covering continents, covering countries, is called as epidemic. And what better than the present example of COVID and the Spanish flu of 1918, okay, where millions of people died, they are dying today, and so many were affected. Exotic disease. Some of us are having exotic things in our house, exotic pets, a yellow parrot or something. Diseases which are imported into a country in which they usually don't otherwise occur. There is no rabies in UK, whereas in India there is rabies everywhere. So in case there is a rabid dog in UK, it becomes exotic disease there. Similarly, we don't have yellow fever in India. But God forbid, Tomorrow we get yellow fever in India, it will be an exotic disease. So diseases which are rare and which are imported into the country, which usually don't otherwise occur, are exotic diseases. Zoonosis, you may be knowing what is zoonosis, an infection or infectious disease transmissible under natural conditions from vertebrate animals to man. Please use this word vertebrate. Don't say animals to man. Vertebrate animals to man. And therefore, there are two types of zoonosis, enzootic and epizootic. Intelligent people would have already guessed enzootic comes from the word endemic and epizootic comes from the word epidemic. A zoonosis which is of endemic proportions is enzootic, whereas an epidemic of zoonosis is called as epizootic disease. Enzootic, an endemic occurring in animals. Epizootic, an outbreak of disease in an animal population, is called as epizootic. Then there are terms like anthropozoonosis, which is because the disease is transmitted from a vertebrate animal to man. Zooanthroponosis is from man to a vertebrate animal, like human TB in cattle. Okay? So therefore, we also can be culprits and transmit diseases to animals. Anthropozoonosis, anthropo, man comes first, zoonosis. Zooanthroponosis, animals come first and then comes man. So the man is transmitting the disease to the animal. And there is amphizoonosis. Some of you can write equally well with left hand and right hand. We call them ambidextrous. So therefore, amphizoonosis, that is man to animals or vice versa. Okay, there are various examples, but you should basically know the definition first. Then we come to the most important terminology, which we have already taught you in the chapter on communicable, is nosocomial infection. Now, it denotes a disease or infection acquired by a person as a result of being in a hospital or other health facility. The disease is not present or not in the incubation period at the time of admission. I come to a hospital because of some fracture in my hand or whatever. I get admitted, and after that, once I'm admitted, I get another disease like, say, pneumonia or something, which is nosocomial or hospital acquired. Disease acquired by a patient as a result of being in a hospital or other health facility. Remember, the disease is not present in the incubation period in the patient at the time of admission. It includes new infections which are acquired in the hospital but appear after discharge. I get discharged from the hospital, I go back home, and in 2 days, I develop a disease. So therefore, that is also nosocomial. It need not develop only in the hospital. Okay? So that is the most important thing I want to tell you here. We have studied the disease HIV/AIDS, and we have talked about opportunistic infections. There are some people who are very opportunistic. They will see an opportunity and they will jump and take it. There is a declaration in the class, 2 people are required for so-and-so project. Some people are very enthusiastic. They will go on the slide and give their names to the HOD or the principal. So they are opportunistic individuals. Okay, some people always eye some opportunity, which is not always bad. Infections caused by an organism due to defect in host immunity. In HIV/AIDS, the individual's immunity is heavily compromised, and therefore all the other infections, they eye that individual and find an opportunity, find the first opportunity to enter and cause a disease in that individual. That's why in full-fledged AIDS, we have got so many opportunistic infections, so many cancers, and so many fungal, bacterial, and viral problems. It occurs in immunocompromised conditions. Organisms like cytomegalovirus, herpes simplex, toxoplasma, mycobacterium tuberculosis, mycobacterium avium, and pneumocystis. They are all waiting out there to enter when a person has AIDS or carcinoma, or he is under long-term use of steroids. So please remember this word opportunity, and you will be able to define what is opportunistic infections. Iatrogenic infection. See, we have covered so many terminologies. Iatrogenic is also something which you have learned in medicine. Any untoward or adverse consequence of a preventive, diagnostic or therapeutic regimen. I am a doctor. I should always remember I must not cause iatrogenic infection in my patients. Because of your, you can say wrong methods, wrong diagnostic or therapeutic regimen, it causes an impairment, handicap, disability, or disease or death because of your professional activity. That is what is an iatrogenic infection or iatrogenic, cause of a disease. I have given you the drug penicillin without doing a sensitivity test, and you have an anaphylactic reaction. So therefore, this is an iatrogenic infection. Reaction to penicillin and other immunizing agents, aplastic anemia following chloramphenicol. These are examples of iatrogenic infections. Surveillance. I have used this word in the second chapter and I have described it well, but we will just revise it. Continuous scrutiny of factors. Remember, there are differences between monitoring and surveillance. If you go back to June, you will remember how I stressed on this. Continuous scrutiny is surveillance, whereas monitoring is standing and just seeing you. Monitor of the class. I am seeing you one time, but surveillance is every day. It is essential for effective control and prevention and includes collection, analysis, interpretation, and distribution of relevant data. So it's the continuous scrutiny of factors that determine the occurrence and distribution of disease and other conditions of ill health. There are types of surveillance called as epidemiological surveillance, nutritional surveillance, demographic surveillance, serological surveillance, and there are various other surveillance or scrutiny of health indices, nutritional status, environmental hazards, and so on and so forth. Therefore, please remember the word surveillance. In the end, we will describe very, very important terminologies which many of you, I wonder why they can't say in the exam. Eradication. We will ask you in the Viva, what is eradication? Termination of all transmission of infection by extermination of the infectious agent through surveillance and containment. It is like pulling out all the hair from your head. That is eradication. It is destroying a disease from the roots. It is an all or none phenomenon. Please remember, smallpox has been eradicated from the world. Okay? It has been taken out, lock, stock, and barrel. So therefore, termination of all transmission of infection by destruction or extermination of the infectious agent is eradication. And if there is eradication, there is also elimination. Like we talked about epidemic and we talked about outbreak. Denotes eradication of disease from a specific geographical region or political jurisdiction. So therefore, in case polio has been eliminated from India, it has not been eradicated from the world. Please stress on this. These are exam questions, sound very easy when we talk in the class and when I'm shouting, and you also register immediately. But in the exam, when you are nervous, when you have forgotten a couple of things, you find it difficult even to define what is eradication and what is elimination. You will be surprised. So therefore, diseases eliminated from India are polio and guinea worm. Diseases which are amenable to eradication are measles and diphtheria. That's why we have got that intensive MR campaign. Okay, we are trying to eliminate measles, and smallpox, of course, has been eradicated from the world. So we talked about various terminologies, which is important, starting from infection to colonization to the types of infection. We talked about what is epidemic, what is endemic, what is zoonosis, what is an exotic disease, what is sporadic, what is nosocomial infection. Then we finally came down to eradication and elimination. These are very, very important terms which we ask you in the form of a short note or in the form of a part of a long question. But surely in the Viva, you will face some kind of questions from this bit on the terminologies, which is called as infectious diseases epidemiology. I don't know why the name is like that, but I would have named it as the various terminologies or the various definitions which are used in the chapter epidemiology. Okay? When you finish the chapter, please go and read this up. I thought I'll finish dynamics of disease transmission, but I will not like to hurry through this. Dynamics of disease transmission is very, very important, and we will cover it up in the next class. It is the host, the source, and the chain in between. Okay? We will discuss this in detail in the next class because it is very, very important from the exam point of view and also from your own knowledge point of view. There are various terminologies which we just described in the infectious diseases epidemiology. But some of the terms which we will learn here in dynamics of disease transmission, like incubation period, latent period, generation time, and various types of carriers and cases, have not been covered. So, epidemiology is a chapter of definitions. You will have to know each and every definition, not just by mugging, but by understanding. I know I have told these a little bit quickly because the time is limited. The times are not very good because we are taking virtual classes. But please remember, once you finish your optal class next and you have a gap, just open your book, that park book, see these things in the book and just mark them, okay, or underline the lines that I have picked up. It will be a quick revision for you and you will also register it better. Again, I'll repeat, these are very easy to understand when we take a class. These words like contamination and infestation and all these things you have heard 100 times. But in the exam, 80% of you cannot describe this, which makes us very sad and sorry because we try to teach you with a lot of passion. But then you just close your mind after the class is over. These are very, very tough times. These are COVID times. You are sitting in the house. Initially, you felt very nice, but I'm sure you must be itching to get back because you are not amongst your friends. You are not amongst studies. You are just in an empty room and you are doing your, and perhaps some of you are not using your time very, very fruitfully. But whenever you get time, even if you don't have the books, try and read them from some other source and register them or make your notes. Community medicine is an important subject. The chapter on health, that is the second chapter, health and disease, and this chapter on epidemiology, which I'm dragging on for the last 4 classes, are very, very important. There are so many things which I have to read again and again before I come to a class. I also forget. I have been teaching this for the last so many years. So please remember, I repeat, the moment the class is over, you see your book, mark it there. In case in doubt, all of you have my numbers, your CRs have my numbers. You can always ask a doubt through WhatsApp and you can clear it then and there. Don't keep the doubt in your mind. Thank you very much for a patient listening. We will meet again next Wednesday. Please be safe and keep your family safe. Thank you.